I am Michelle Baum, the co-founder and COO of the Nova Method. And with me today is my partner, co-founder and CEO, Christine Perkett.
Hi. Thanks for having me,
Hi.
Michelle.
Why, thanks for joining me, Christine. We thought that it is high time that we launched our own podcast. And since we both showered today, we thought today would be the day to do it. So we want to explore the disconnect between marketing campaigns and their intended audiences. At the Nova Method, we say it's not about you. That's the first thing you're going to see when you're on our website. And that really underscores this disconnect. And so we thought, our first podcast, let's explain what we mean by it's not about you and how that translates into how we do things different and how marketers can incorporate some of our philosophy into what they're doing starting now. Chris, do you want to start by explaining what we mean by it's not about you?
Sure. Yes, I was talking about this morning, and I remember when we merged our companies to form the Nova Method, we had a little back and forth about whether or not we wanted to say it's not about you, but it really was an ethos that you and I both believed in, which is so many times in marketing and PR and communications, brands come out full force talking about themselves. And while at some point you have to do that, I think we like to think of it more like walking into a party where you really know no one. In fact, you and I have both been to networking events in the last week, and you don't walk into the room and just say, "Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm 5'5", and I live in Denver, and I have two kids," and just start talking about yourself. And so we want brands to think about it the same way, right? Get to know your audience, be welcoming and warm, and show an affinity for getting to know them and their needs first. And so when we say it's not about you, of course it is about you as a brand, but we wanted to stop brands in their tracks and really get them to think about how they're connecting with, and not just connecting with or engaging with, but resonating with their core audiences, whether it's prospects, customers, media, investors, employees, whoever you're trying to communicate with. Stop and think about them first before you start talking about what you have to offer.
When we see the disconnect, it's often coming from other executives, other people who are weighing in on the strategy and the messaging. It's the sales team or the C-level executives who have also a strong opinion about how it should be, and it often can veer a plan in another direction. So, where do you think the breakdown is? Do you think that it is sort of the collaboration that happens internally with different mindsets coming together, or is there something else going on there?
That's a good question. I mean, every situation is unique. So if I had to sort of give a benchmark, I would say everyone's afraid if they don't get their message out immediately or get their message out like right at the top, whoever they're trying to reach isn't going to hear it. For example, I mean, last month, we had some back and forth with a client on some content, and there were a lot of voices in the room, and everyone wants to be heard. And so I think there are certain times, and marketing needs to lead this, certain times when you take all of those messages and you give them the table and you let them say what they have to say. But marketing and communications leaders, the CCOs, the CMOs really need to be the trusted last stop before a client pushes those messages out. And organizations need to trust that they hired these communicators for a reason, and that is to take everything on the table that matters and prioritize it appropriately. There's got to be an end decision maker, and that should be the folks that you hire to communicate to the outside world.
I would add to that when we think about the different pieces of content that we put out there and what each piece of content even means and how it is structured for a very particular audience member or segments within your target audience, to make sure that those pieces of content are even personalized and geared to those specific audiences, and keeping that in mind. Like a press release is for one audience, blog could be for another one, a white paper for another one, different content, different audiences, different expectations, similar, same messaging, but said differently. The story can be different.
Yes, I mean, there is an underlying narrative, but the way you deliver it and on what platform you're delivering it and in what type of content, like you said, definitely can create nuances that are important because a CTO wants to get out the speeds and feeds of the product, of course, and to say we're on this version and this is why it matters. They're talking to maybe a more technical buyer, but there are other decision makers in the room that also need to hear it in the way that they like to absorb information. So I totally agree with you. Yeah, I think everyone needs to trust that the right message will get out to the right audience, the right time, and in the right way that they will consume and engage it, and it will resonate with that particular audience, whether they're a developer using the product or they're the financial leader making the decision on the budget. Those are the narrative is the same, but it's delivered in a way that resonates with how those particular individuals would consume and resonate with.
Where do you most often see a gap between what brands intend to communicate and what audiences actually take away?
Content, specifically, I would say on social media platforms, because brands have something they want to say, but it's a community. And then you have third parties, not always credible, chiming in. So if you think about a Reddit or a G2 or even a LinkedIn, you might put out a piece of brand content that says a certain thing. And then you have commenters giving their opinion or their interpretation of what you've said. And then that is intertwined into the message and the narrative now, whether you wanted it to be there or not. So I think that's where that convolution kind of happens. And marketers and specialists like yourself that really focus on crisis communications, where it might get to that degree, hopefully not. I mean, I think it's even at a subtle degree, it can have an effect, but they've got to pay attention to those conversations. You can't just issue your content or your brand story and your brand narrative and believe that's it, because in the world of digital and social media, that's not it. So you've always got to be monitoring those conversations and participating in them ongoing.
Which is often where a lot of these sort of mini crises pop up because people aren't being heard or they feel like they're not being heard. And there isn't a response from a brand that confirms that that person's been heard. So completely agree with you. The number one use for at least communications for social media is listening. It's like the direct line into your target audience.
Right. And I totally agree with that. I think that listening is a component that not the communicators so much, but some of the other employees within an organization might forget about. That is just as important, whether it's right or wrong. Whatever the person has commented on or is saying is not the point. The point is to acknowledge that as a brand, you're listening and you care about what they have to say, and you're there to resolve if it's an issue, or to clarify if it's a misunderstanding, or to provide further information if that's what's required for them to make a decision to buy from you. And then, of course, it's different B2B versus B2C.
Where do you think the biggest tensions are between what a company wants to say and what the audience needs to hear?
Oh, where do I think the biggest tensions are? I mean, I go back to the speeds and feeds, or even this morning I was speaking with someone about this and talking about, a brand soapbox that for so long before social media really took off, brands could stand on their soapbox and say everything they wanted to say and tout all the things they wanted to tout. And now they get direct and immediate pushback. And I think that creates the tension is it continues to be an evolution. It's been quite some time now that consumers and buyers and prospects, customers have had that direct line to brands, but I still think brands are adjusting. And we're used to being able to put an advertisement out that says something. And as long as it meets the truth in advertising, it was fine. But now it could still meet those standards and you could still get pushback immediately, and you can't ignore it, or it could grow and fester and become a full-blown crisis. That's where I think the tension is it kind of
Yeah.
goes back to what we were just talking about, listening. You have to listen as well as speak.
Yeah, and I guess that brings me to another question. Like when we say it's not about you, some people, when we were message testing our positioning, we talked to several marketers and communicators,
Yeah.
and some said, "Yeah, but it still has to be about the brand." So how would you say that we balance the brand narrative with audience relevance, because it's not about ignoring the brand either?
Right. No, I mean, it's really, I think what we're saying is there's a bridge to the conversation that you want to have about what your offerings are, but that bridge has to start with the person you're communicating with. It's almost like any good relationship. I mean, even a personal relationship, a friendship or a romance or, an employee-employer relationship, you need to demonstrate that you're listening first. And I keep going back to listening. I didn't know this is what we'd be talking about, but
Yeah.
it's so true. It's not about you. It's just like I said in the beginning of the conversation, it's a stop in your tracks, take a breath. Kind of like, if you went to marriage counseling or something, like take a breath
Yeah.
and listen to what the other person wants to say and digest it before you respond. So, it's a bridge. It's a bridge to better communication. And I mean, that's what marketing PR is all about. Marketing communications has the word communications in it. You can't communicate if you don't listen.
Yeah. And would you say are the signals, like data or behavioral, when a brand can prove they're actually in sync with their audience?
I would say amplification and engagement. I think it's different for B2B and B2C, but I mean, one of the beauties of AI right now is to that point, when you see your narrative that you have worked so hard and put so many hours into building being repeated, whether it's through earned media, whether it's through a review, whether it's through a community, a social media platform like LinkedIn, when people start using your language, I think that's the signal. And I think that means that you're resonating because they're repeating what you're saying. And that means that there's recall. And you don't get recall if you don't have resonance.
I was talking to someone earlier about the whole concept of nobody cares about how the thing works. They just want to know that it does. Want to know is how it makes their life better. Nobody cares how you built the thing. The speeds and feeds got to go. But, those conversations haven't changed in 30 years. It's the same conversation of, is that really what your clients care about? And if it is it really a press release? Because I'm guessing not. I'm guessing it's an email or it's a blog or
Right.
it's maybe you have a community or a Slack channel where, you announce these things or let them know
Right.
about 7.2.4.8 version. Maybe wait till 8.0 to make the announcement.
I also think that you hit upon a couple of things I was thinking about earlier. How can you tell if it's resonating? Ask, do survey, do focus groups, which I know sounds so old school, but everything old is new again, including earned media. Yay, PR. And I think brands sometimes forget to stop and say, hey, did this resonate with you? Or did you like this? Or do you like A or B? And that part of marketing should not be forgotten.
Can you think of I'm putting you on the spot
Oh,
as
good.
I think of an example, but can you think of a moment where like a small shift in framing has made a difference in how the audience responds?
Small shift in framing. Yeah, I mean, I would go back when we were rebranding a very popular human HR tech brand, and we changed the name, which sounded very technical, almost a little bit robotic, and we really dug into the fact that this was about people and there needed to be like a warmer word. And this was branding, not necessarily PR, but it led to everything after that. And that was when we rebranded Cornerstone. So that's HR tech, and it used to be called Cyber U. And we really chose Cornerstone because your people are the cornerstone and the heartbeat of your organization. And so that tiny little nuance, well, I shouldn't say tiny, it was a big campaign, but
Yeah.
that slight change in the name really resonated with the audience and the HR leaders and the people that they were leading. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. What about you?
Yeah.
Do you have an example that you can think of?
Well, I don't it's more of a strategic play. When we were working for a company called Identity Force and the Equifax data breach happened. Identity Force was an identity theft protection software
Mm.
company. And when the Equifax data breach came out, very strangely, there weren't a lot of voices coming from the identity theft protection industry. Which
Hmm.
you're like, what? Why wouldn't you? And zero CEOs were talking. We said this is an opportunity, and Identity Force at the time was a small family run business. But the CEO was willing to put himself out there, and we said let's educate people on what they should be doing and how they should protect themselves. It was a shift in saying who are the voices out there talking, and the way we framed it in that we were educating people because that's exactly what people needed at the time. It resonated really well, and the engagement, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but
But we do have
it was incredible.
the case studies on our
Yeah, oh yeah.
website. So for those listening, go to www.thenovamethod.com. and look at our case studies. It's on there. But actually, I'm really glad you brought that up because we didn't plan this, but I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit based on that, which is back to it's not about you. How do you resonate with someone? You build trust. And that right there is trust on multiple levels. The CEO trusting the communications team that he hired or she hired to do the right thing. It was a risk driven decision. It was the right
Yeah.
one, but it was risky. And so he trusted the communications team and that built trust with their customers, with Identity Forces customers. And so going back to it's not about you is wholly about building trust. And you don't build trust by talking about yourself first. You build trust by showing that you care about whoever it is or whichever audience it is that you're trying to influence and build a relationship with. So that just made me think of that because I know you and I were talking earlier today about trust and communications and how we're building that up in this day and
Yep.
age of clients and AI and all of those new things that we're dealing with in marketing and PR. So I just wanted to throw
Well,
that.
and no, it actually sparks another thought. And I was just on an interview before this, and we were talking about I think the question was along the lines of, how is the Nova method growing in your business? And I said, it's all based on trust. It's referrals and it's thought leadership and it's recommendations based on trust. And I mean, I think most people hire a PR firm not because they got, the last hit in Forbes or whatever. It's about like, do I get a good vibe from these people? Can I trust the counsel that they're going to give me? Because we're giving it to a CMO who then has to go present it to her CEO, the C-level executive, the board. Now, we're also engaging with those people as well, but we're not in every meeting.
Right.
So, whoever it is that hires us has to know that we've got their back. And so, the relationship that we have with our clients has to be all about trust.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And the beautiful thing about that too is that when clients come back to us, how we build the Nova method with clients who have worked with us 3, 4, 5 times, and every time they move to a new VP or CMO position, they give us a call and hire us again. And that to me is a beautiful testament to trust in the B2B world. And goes
Yeah.
back to it's not about you, it's about what you build and what you promise and what you deliver. So yeah.
Let's think about like what concrete ideas that we can give to anyone who might watch this. Like what's one habit or discipline that internal marketing communications team could keep in mind or exercise in order to stay grounded in the audience?
I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, which is to ask questions. So many people, executives across all different areas of business discipline are afraid to ask questions because they don't want to look uninformed. But asking questions is a great way to build trust, a great way to build two-way communication, a great way to pivot your campaigns if they're not effective. If you don't ask, you don't know. So that's the first thing that comes to mind for me.
Yeah. I would say ask the question, who cares?
Uh,
I ask that question of myself a lot. And if I can't answer it in a really passionate way, then I rethink the strategy. Um, and I would say, who cares? And not only who cares, but exactly who cares among your target audience. And why are they going to care? And what is
and
it that
why?
you're saying that is so compelling?
And I was thinking the why also, like, why do they care? Because that goes back to resonance, right? So if
Yep.
you don't understand why they would care, you're not going to resonate with them, no matter how many hours you put into your messaging and positioning. So I love that. Yeah.
Yep. Here's another question maybe we could answer for marketers. Should they think about validating messages before they go to market?
Here's how you can validate. Well, I mean, obviously, research, which is easier than ever today with AI support. Um, and I think, again, going back to it's not about you, stop and do the research based on the questions that you think your customers or your particular audience, even if it's employees, are going to be asking and work backward from that. Too many times we spend hours ideating with everyone that's already drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And I think we've got to stop and say, how does this translate to the questions that they're going to ask and the value that they're looking for?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. And I would also say, we we got on the phone with people that we've known for a long time that we respect, past clients, journalists, that we've worked with, and we asked them the question. We threw it at them and said, "What do you think about this?" And tell us your honest feelings. Give us the
Mm.
honest feedback. And we took that and we thought about it. And some of our messaging is different because of that. I think we found a middle ground between the research that we did on market industry target audience as well as the verbal feedback we got. And I think that's really important. And I would say, I can hear a marketer in my head right now saying, "Yeah, I hear you," but that they're going to be like, "Hey, we're launching this product next week." So, who realistically has the time to do that? And I think marketers have to have really strong backbone today to be able to push back, because a lot of what marketers do is not only ex, ex educating people about the brand, but it's also protecting the brand. And when marketers and communicators can step back and say, "We're going to do this right. We're going to take a couple extra days. We're going to really think this through." But, you know how it goes. And we work in a really fast world. We have very high expectations. Executives want things done immediately for reasons we might not even
Of
know
course. Yeah.
about.
I think one of the things is the marketing leads, communications leads need to have a seat at the table. And I think we're seeing more and more of that now than we did in the past, which is good. They might not be the end decision maker, but any CEO, startup founder, whoever legal, they have to chime in and someone has to be that final say. And I think marketers can get to the best advice by asking each of those stakeholders and constituents, what is it that you believe? So just take a piece of news, for example. What does this news mean to you? What is the number one point you want to make, to whom and why? And go around the table and ask every one of the stakeholders in the room. Their answers are going to be very different, but then you can demonstrate the challenge of communications and prioritize which of those should be at the top. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think enough executive teams do that and stop and really think about, everyone's just fighting to get their messages in there. I mean, we've dealt with that recently. And you've got to really step back and say, why are we putting this out there? You said that earlier, like, who cares and why? All of
Yeah.
those stakeholders are going to have a different answer on why they care and why they think and who they think will care. And so just get it all out on the table. We love doing this exercise on many different levels with brands, whether it's positioning or branding or a news release. Get it all out on the table and then understand the priorities and why they exist. And then the marketing and communications leaders can shape it appropriately.
It starts to lay a roadmap for how a marketing communications leader can sort of operationalize this concept of audience first thinking across a cross functional team. So not just marketing,
Right.
by being able to have that conversation or facilitate that conversation in a room with multiple stakeholders from multiple areas of the business, and to be able to ask them that question, I think does begin to operationalize when we say, ask not just ourselves who cares, but ask the other stakeholders
Right.
who cares about this. Then we can start to think about all the different audiences and all the different answers, like you said. And I think that is a step to operationalizing an audience first approach to marketing.
I agree, and I love that you brought up operationalizing because I know we're working on that internally here. And in fact, even this week, we have some of our own news that we're working on and shaping. And we stepped back and said, you know, who are we trying to reach and why are they going to care? Because it was a conversation we were having earlier, is like
Yeah.
debating whether or not these two pieces of news belong in the same press release or if they're so different that they need to be treated as unique pieces of content. And sometimes that can happen. And that's why, go back to the marketing and communications leads need to be in the room. You might think that your message is super important, but if we don't understand the why, it's not going to get out there in the most optimized way. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, and just trusting that your marketing and communications leaders are there to shape the news in the best way possible and to remember everyone in the room is there for the same reason, which is for the company to be successful so everyone there can be successful. So I think sometimes teams get too caught up in getting their opinion out versus remembering that you all have the same goal and working from that.
Yeah. Let's leave our listeners or our watchers with a key takeaway. So what would you say is one mindset shift that separates brands that consistently resonate with those that might struggle with alignment?
The first thing that comes to mind for me, and it's especially apparent now with AI and all of the different layers of competition that come up, is to step back and hurry up and wait. So many brands are rushing. They get caught up in, like, even when social media came on the scene, we'd have clients say, we need to be here, 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 and here. And I would say, which is actually brings up a piece of news from last week, but I would say you're a B2B company. You don't need to be on Snapchat. Maybe now that's different according to Snapchat's report last week, but that's our next episode. But you don't have to be everywhere all the time, all at once, whatever that great movie was, everything everywhere all at once. You need to be, as you always like to do for me, you pull me in and you say, focus. Like, let's be strategic about this, right? Like, I want to be everything to everybody, and you can't do that, nor should you. So, to step back, take a deep breath, and be strategic versus just being present out there. Otherwise, you're wasting cycles, resources, budget, and even think cycles of your team. And it'll just land flat because you're not being specific enough. And I think we live in such a go, 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 go society right now that it's easy for teams to get caught up in that pace and just try to get something out versus get something out that will resonate and grow the business.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important takeaway is slow down just for a second. And if you can't answer the so what or so why in a way that makes you proud of the work that you're doing, then stop, pivot.
And I would just bookend that with, of course, if you're in a crisis, you have to act quickly, but you still need to hire professionals like you to help you take that breath and act quickly with intention. Everything you do from a marketing, communications, branding,
Right.
positioning standpoint needs to be intentional, not reactive. And so if you can lead from that and build trust, you'll build resonance, and it will be about you, but people will hear it in a way that gets them to move in the way that you want them to.
That makes sense. Chris Perkett, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Michelle
I think we
Baum.
did pretty well for our first podcast.
I think so. Let's
Great.
see if in the comments it resonated, and then we'll know. Thank you, everyone.